everybody. Today we're going to talk about boredom. So it's not only summer, but we've had the coronavirus, and so a lot of us are experiencing boredom. So we're going to talk about kind of what that is, why teens experience boredom in particular, and some other interesting things that I have learned recently. So, how many times do you think that you've heard, "I'm so bored," from your kids from the time they could speak? I mean, if we all had $1 for every time that we heard that, we would all be very rich people. "I'm so bored, Mom. I'm so bored." And it can get frustrating as parents because you try and give suggestions for things that they can do. "No, that's boring. No, I don't want to do that. That's boring." And then it's like, okay, fine, just figure out what to do on your own. So we're going to talk a little bit about boredom. First, let's talk about the teenage brain. So this is something I've learned recently that I think is really interesting. So teens, their reward system is set up differently from an adult's brain. So they have less dopamine overall, but when it's released, it has a much greater impact. Pleasure and reward feels a little bit differently to them, and neuroscientists think it's just because of the way that the brain is turning from a child brain into an adult brain. And this is one of the reasons that they tend to take risks, and we'll talk about that in a future week. But what's interesting to note with that now is how it affects boredom. So if your teen is naturally searching for risks or for interest, or if they're often more curious, they're looking for a dopamine rush, and they're looking for stimulation that their developing brain needs, and that can lead to more boredom. So in the book, Your Teen Isn't Crazy by it's Jerusha and I think Jeremy Clark, they say this: "What's behind your teen's boredom? A developing reward circuit that's thirsty for experience, preferably new and thrilling experience. Some clinicians call this sensation seeking, others novelty seeking. It amounts to basically the same thing. Teens long for something different, something exciting, something that will raise their naturally lower dopamine level in their under-constructed brains." So when your teen is bored, they're looking for something that will stimulate them, that will, their brain is developing, they're creating neural circuits, they're also pruning away neural circuits, and the ones that they're going to keep are the ones that they use the most. And so they're looking for ways to basically to develop their brain, which is really interesting. So another quote in Brainstorm, Daniel Siegel says, "Adolescence is also a time filled with new ideas. In many ways, seeking novelty is rewarding as it fills experiences, behaviors, perceptions, thoughts, ideas, intentions, and beliefs with the spirit of adventure. This striving for novelty is a creative power that can be harnessed for the benefit of everyone if we see this move toward new things and independence in a positive way." So in the busyness of our lives normally, things are a little bit different right now. Sometimes it can get frustrating with our teens' desire for novelty, for excitement, for all of these different things that they're really not getting right now. Most of us aren't getting those things. And so it can lead to all of us of just this feeling of emptiness, this feeling that we need to fill our time, fill our lives, fill with just something that's interesting and meaningful. So let's talk about some things that you can kind of do as a parent to help your teen. Now none of these are necessarily tell them what to do, because we know that doesn't work very well. So I kind of looked a little deeper about some things that we can help our teens understand boredom and some things that we can help them. So the first one is to encourage your teens' curiosity. So teens are, because of the way that their brains are right now, they're naturally curious. So maybe stretch your ideas a little bit of what's worth spending time and money on. I know I'm kind of cheap, and I feel like if someone's going to not stick with something forever, that maybe it's a waste of money. So I need to examine that mindset a little bit differently and kind of decide what's worth. That even just doing something for a little while can stretch my teen's brain and help her learn and grow and develop. It can help fulfill that desire for curiosity and for learning something new, even if it's not something she's going to stick with forever. The second one is to allow for course correction. So this kind of ties in with the first one, but sometimes we, I think, push too hard for our teens to, I'm trying to think of the right word, because I do think it's good to honor commitments, but sometimes we push our teens to stick with things long past when it's helpful for our teen. And so it's just kind of a matter of sitting down with yourself, with your teen, and really thinking through what they've committed to, why they've committed to it, what would be the purpose of sticking to that commitment. Are there other people? That sort of thing. So maybe you want them to stick through the season if they're doing a sport, which makes total sense, and I think that's right to do. But maybe they don't need to do soccer or football or whatever the next season. So it's just kind of balancing and figuring out when what's the difference between the novelty wearing off but it's still something that they enjoy versus maybe they'd be better off trying something new. The third one is to give them space. Sometimes we step in too quickly, and teens need a lot of space to process their emotions, their thoughts, their changing brains, their changing bodies, and it's good to give them that space and to tell them that it's okay to be bored. There's a reason for it. We'll talk about that in a minute, and to just kind of encourage them to take that downtime to just be with themselves. The fourth thing is to make spending time with your teen a priority. So about 86% of teens report that they think highly of their parents, and 77% say that they enjoy spending time with their parents. Those numbers kind of surprised me a little bit. Sometimes they just get tired of doing the same old thing with you. And so one of the things that parents can do is look for new ways to spend time with your teen, look for ways to try a new hobby or watch a new video or show interest in something that they're doing, or just really think of something fun and interesting that the two of you guys can do together. The fifth one is to ask if they want for suggestions when they tell you that they're bored. I tend to move into kind of problem solving mode, and so my kids say they're bored, I just start listing off, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. And I think it's important, especially for teens, to ask first if they want suggestions, because what a question does is it kind of changes which part of the brain that you're coming from. And so when you ask them a question, they have to kind of stop and think, oh, do I want suggestions? Why am I saying that I'm bored? Am I just saying it to say it? Or am I saying it because I want suggestions? And so asking first will help them think a little bit differently, and then you can see what answer they give. So then if they say yes, they might be in a more open mindset where they'll be open to suggestions. The sixth thing is to actually teach your teen about boredom. What is that emotion? What does it feel like? Why do we experience it? James Dankert says, the function of boredom is not to make us bored. It is a call to action. It is telling us that what we are doing now is failing to satisfy us in some important way. But its purpose is not just to push us into any action. Boredom encourages us to choose actions that give expression to who we are. Our actions have to matter. This is something that I haven't really thought about before, and so I've been thinking about the last couple of days. I'm going to share the article that quote comes from, because it's a really interesting article. And so when our teens are saying that they're bored, they're not just looking for any action. Just, we'll go watch TV, we'll go do this, we'll go do this. And that can take the edge off of boredom, for sure. Like, there's nothing wrong with entertaining ourselves. But it could be that we can be a little bit more discerning when our teens are saying that they're bored, and we can start asking some deeper questions. So the last tip I have is to discuss what actions matter. So instead of just making suggestions to your teen, start asking them deeper questions like, what are you feeling right now? What would satisfy you? What are you looking for? What hole are you feeling inside of yourself that you want to fill? Is there something meaningful that you would like to be doing? Do you think you're needing to do something useful? Your team, all of us want to interact with the world in a meaningful way. We want to feel like we're contributing. We want to feel like we matter. And I think with the coronavirus for all of us, we're used to kind of measuring what we do by our actions, whether it's a student going to school, whether it's doing activities, being in a play, whatever it was that your teen was doing, they're not doing anymore. And so, yes, this boredom is part of it, is just not having anything to do. We just have a lot of time in our hands. But I think that there's something deeper than that we kind of owe it to ourselves and to our teens and to our kids to teach them. What is your boredom pushing you to do? And more than that, what is your boredom pushing you to become? Is there something that you feel like you could be doing with your time that would be more useful? And just kind of along those lines, we're going to talk some more about this in the group this week. But I encourage you to just kind of sit down yourself when you feel boredom and figure out what action is it that boredom wants you to take. It's probably not just scrolling on your phone. There might be something more meaningful that you could be doing. And then turn that over to your kids and to your teens. And when they're complaining about being bored, would you like to do something creative? Would you like to do something intellectual? Now that they're not even in school anymore, maybe there are some intellectual needs that aren't being filled. And so maybe you guys could watch a documentary together, or just kind of think outside the box and help your teen look outside the box, and maybe help your teen find a little bit more of a purpose for the time that they have and the way that they can fill it. So thanks for checking in with me today. Say hi in the comments if you watched the video, and I'll see you in the group.